The summer break's over, F1's back, and I'm officially back as well. Had a nice vacation, visited the motherland for a bit, did a bit of karting, enjoyed myself, went to Portugal as well, what a beautiful country that is, and got a nice refresh, and now I'm able to provide amazing content for you guys. I missed you guys dearly, glad to be back. We got a race weekend, we got upgrades to talk about, and if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. We're almost at that 60K mark, which is just ridiculous. Thank you so much for the support, even over the summer break while I've been gone. Missed you guys, but let's get this started like we usually do with the rear wings. Zandvoort's a tricky weekend. We usually know this track for its super high downforce, but teams have gone for different configurations, at least for this weekend, and we could see changes all throughout the practice sessions. Now, it's going to be wet in qualifying. We could see some rain in the practice sessions. And on Sunday, it's only a 20% chance, but you never really know here. These clouds can just roll in very fast, so we'll have to see what happens. As we saw last year, the heavens rained down. It was a lot of rain. It was a spectacular race. Fernando finishing P2. Max had what I would say was pretty much a perfect race by him. And overall, it was just very fun. Pierre even finished on the podium. So the wets could very much dictate how teams choose to go about these rear wings, but from what we see so far, let's go over it. The first four teams to cover is Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull. Now these are our top four teams. I would say McLaren is the quickest. Mercedes and Red Bull are pretty much fighting there with McLaren usually on the weekends, and Ferrari is catching up. They had a very good Belgium GP. Looking at the wings, as for Mercedes, they do have what I would say is the highest downforce out of the four teams here. McLaren is right up there. Both of them have a high downforce spec on the wing. It's not Monaco spec, but it's pretty high. It's definitely a hefty wing that will give them very good traction, and sectors 1 and 2 should be very strong. I'm wondering if they also want that downforce for the rain that is coming. Now, as for the Ferrari car, this is still a medium high, and same with the Red Bull. So each team is running a very high spec of wing. Mercedes and McLaren, just because of that lower plane, as you can see, it's a bit deeper, shows us that they're running a bit more downforce towards the rear for their car. As I said, this could change throughout the weekend. There could be replacements here for maybe a medium spec on the Mercedes and McLaren instead of the high. But for McLaren, I'm going to cover a lot more about the rear part of the car. There's a lot to go over that we've seen over the summer break and why they're going down a certain direction. The other four teams I want to cover is Aston Martin, VCarb, Alpine, and Williams. Aston Martin's using a rear wing we've seen consistently throughout the season. It's medium high, it's a pretty hefty wing, but it should still do the job on downforce, but also provide a little bit more straight line speed while going through that banking section. They've been very good in top speed. It's mainly lacking in downforce in certain corners, especially medium and high, but Zandvoort's been a great place for them throughout these regulations. In 22, they were very successful. 23, obviously the P2 from Fernando. And I do suspect the car to actually perform pretty well here. As for VCarb, they're up and down on weekends, but they've consistently been within that P10 to P14 range. They're always around the points, and the team has been changing a lot on their car from old to new specs. They are running what I would say is probably one of the lowest downforce wings here, but then Alpine is also running a medium high, while Williams is also running a medium. So medium and medium for the VCarb and Williams team, and medium high for Aston Martin and Alpine. But all teams are running some type of downforce. We're not seeing low like we saw in the Williams last year. This has been their most successful weekend, and they do have an upgrade here we're going to go over. Last two teams to cover, which is Sauber and Haas. Sauber is running a medium to high downforce spec. They're not in high downforce, and Haas is what I would probably say a medium downforce spec. They always like to go for a bit of top speed. They're kind of the Williams of this year, but a much more consistent car. They've been very good. But as of lately, Belgium and Hungary weren't their best tracks. I do suspect them to do a bit better here, but I don't think they're going to be in the points. Maybe if Hulk can pull off something crazy or K-Mag has a great weekend. As for Stake, we're going to have to see. They've been a very on and off car, and they still haven't figured out this upgrade package they got just recently from Hungary. As I stated before with McLaren, I wanted to cover the amount of rear wings they've had throughout the season. As you can see, from that top to bottom spec, it's been different in a bunch of GPs, and you can see what they've changed and the minuscule details they've done to the rear wing to try and improve their efficiency. This has also been done to the beam wing, but there isn't a great picture showing off all of the beam wings they've done. We saw that they brought in Silverstone 3 different specs, a high, a medium, and a low downforce beam wing to go in unison with the rear of the car. It's been all about aero efficiency with this car. They haven't brought big upgrades. And if we actually use this chart made by Lewis, FE1, who does an amazing job, he did this last year, he's doing it again, showing us when the upgrades were brought and where they were brought to the car for both drivers 1 and 2. You look at McLaren, the only thing they've been very consistent on is rear wings and beam wings for the car. They had that big package in Miami. Ever since then, they did bring a front wing package later on in Austria, but overall the car hasn't been as upgraded as something like a Aston Martin, or if you look at the other teams, you can see that the chart is much more filled out, while McLaren has been very efficient on rear wings and beam wings and trying to just get the best out of the package they have, which is why they've been so consistent from GP to GP. Along with the rear wings, we also found something very interesting that I wanted to show off, which was shown from the interior part of the car of how they transfer the airflow from the side pod inlet all the way to the back of the rear engine cover. As you can see this piece right here, it shows that they've purposefully made something to have this hot air flow through the back, which is clean air, in hopes to give them more straight line speed, which seems to be working for the team. We've seen that Red Bull did have an innovation last year with that little bump from the rear part of the car. McLaren also has their ways. I guarantee that every team under the car has little aero parts like this, but it's very cool to see very detailed images of this. As you can see, look at how that piece looks. It's almost an extension of the side pod, but it's the interior piece of the car showing that they want this air to be going through the rear part of the engine cover. As I stated before, this is now clean air flowing through the car, which can give more straight line speed as it is clean and more efficient, but it can unstabilize the downforce if not done correctly. Clearly the team has done a great job at stabilizing the full car everywhere. Going over now some of the upgrades and updates we're going to see here. As you can see on the Red Bull, they have brought back this high downforce spec, but this is going to be the first time we see it on Checo's car. And we have already seen from the announcements from Helmut and from Christian that the team will be going back on certain specs to help Checo throughout the season. As we know, he is still announced for the team. I think they said they're going to say something about it in September. I really don't want to go over driver talk on Checo and Liam and Daniel and whatever else. It's such a mess and it's honestly so annoying to speak about. We won't know up until we hear it fully in detail that somebody will be replacing him. It's hard to say why he's still in the car. Hopefully he can show out and we can see a little bit more of that potential from Checo. He is running the high downforce spec, but what is different on the car and I found pretty interesting is the front wing on this spec of car is still the old one. He was running this back in Hungary as well. Let's see if this gives them a bit more stability, as he does like running that understeer setup in comparison to somebody like Max who likes oversteer. There were a lot of talks that were debunked about the braking. Don't want to really get into that because I've seen a lot of rumors, people stating that Red Bull was cheating in some instances. Well, this wasn't the case and it was just rumored about the asymmetrical braking. This would have given teams advantages going into corners and would have helped with the understeer, but it wasn't something that was happening. It's just a precaution for the 2026 rules that are getting implemented into Formula One soon, as teams are about to work on those cars. Mercedes is a team here that will be dividing their upgrades. We saw that pretty nice floor detailing in Belgium, but was not used in the GP. Obviously, we saw what happened with George. He was disqualified. Lewis ended up coming to win, but they were pretty much the strongest car on a track that was very unfavorable during this regulation period. So the car is in a very good state of mind. And as you can see, it's still the same car as usual. Lewis will run the old floor spec, which was ran in Spa. He did say it gave him a lot more stability and he liked how the car was running in this spec. It's very minor detailing. You can see that the floor is very similar now to that of the RB20 with that little upward flow in the beginning of its floor edge. And they've changed the point of where the side impact structure comes out to have more outwash in that section of the car. It'll be interesting to see if they revert back or if Lewis is going to run this in the next couple of GPs. He will be running this for the whole weekend, stated from Mercedes and George Russell himself. Other things to note from Mercedes and what they've been changing, they're very slight variations and they never get noted in the upgrade documents, but that middle part of the front wing closest to the nose has sometimes been changed to either a lower downforce spec or a higher downforce spec. As you can see here, it is connecting with that last upward element, but it gets changed depending on track. We also see it with the Aston Martin car, which are just interesting little details to note before getting into the GP weekend. Aston will be running that same floor spec. They have said that their correlation is now finally working. They have a direction No upgrades for the team here. We will see them very soon, as we will see for a lot of teams bringing big upgrades for these next couple of GPs. Ferrari is still bringing each front wing from the beginning of the season to where they changed it in Imola to see what runs better on the car. They did definitely figure something out. In Belgium, they had a great GP weekend. They're just missing a few tenths, but big upgrades are coming to the car soon. The top spec is the Imola one, and the bottom one is from the beginning of the season. Williams have also brought a upgrade to their side pod. As you can see, it is that overbite concept, very similar now looking to the Sauber car, and it does seem that every team will be going to this spec in 2025. So interesting to see how every team was trying to get on the Red Bull bandwagon in 2023, have that underbite concept, and then we go into 2024, they completely changed the car, and now every team is trying to run the overbite. It has been talked about that more airflow goes over the top of that side pod rather than under, going into that floor section. So we see teams seeing that in the simulator, and more teams are trying to emulate this now on their new upgrades to their cars in 2024. If you guys enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe. It would mean the world. Missed you guys. Glad to be back, and peace.